All right, notice Ephesians chapter 6 in verse 1. It says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with thee, and that thou mayest live long on the earth." And right there, it was referencing one of the 10 commandments, Exodus 20:12, where it says, "Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee." And I want to preach tonight about honoring your parents. And this is not just for kids. This is also for adults. If your parents are living, you should honor your parents. In fact, even if your parents are dead, you should still honor your parents. And everybody in here has parents, even if they are already they're dead and gone. You should still honor your parents and the biblical sense. And we're going to talk about what that is tonight. And I want you to notice, too, how in Ephesians 6, after it tells you to honor your parents, it says, for your benefit, so it will be well with you, and you may live long on the earth. And here in Exodus chapter 20, when it gives that command, it's telling them, honor your father and mother, that thy days may be long upon the land. That's a promise. Now, this promise, I want to make sure we understand it properly. Say, well, I know a person, he honored his parents and he died at 20 years old. Therefore, it wasn't true. Here's what we need to understand about that. I've also heard it interpreted this way. It's like, well, he would have died even sooner if he hadn't honored his parents. It's like, what you need to understand about a command like that, that promise is given to a nation. If you want to survive and thrive as a nation, you better be a nation of people who honor their parents, because a society and even an individual who doesn't honor their parents is probably going to have a bad end, and they're not going to have a good life. And so there are things that, as a general rule, as a societal thing, as a nation, we ought to honor our parents. We ought to put them in high regard. Otherwise, we are going to be a nation that's going to be in decline, and we're not going to last very long. And so again, if a person dies young, it doesn't mean they must not have honored their parents. Don't get that idea. And if a person lives to be 100 years old, that doesn't necessarily mean they did honor their parents. Okay, there's going to be those exceptions, but as a society, as a people, we definitely want to do this. And even as a church, I think we can make application. At Liberty Baptist Church, if we are not a congregation of people who honors their parents, you can mark it down. We will not make it as a church, because the type of people who do not honor their parents are not the type of people that are going to survive long term doing the things of God. We can just mark that down right now. And so we need to make sure this is always a priority for us as an individual. It ought to be something we promote as a church. It ought to be something we promote in our culture, in our government. Public schools, okay? I don't even know what they're teaching these days, but you know what? If they were wise, they would promote honoring parents to the children in those schools, because that will make our society better. That would make America great again. If we would do that kind of thing, if we would actually do things like that, if they would brainwash them with things like that, other than all this other nonsense, we would be so much better as a society. Strong families are necessary to survive difficult times. We're going to have economic downturns. There's going to be negative things that come. There's going to be wars that are going to have to be fought. There's going to be there's going to be natural disasters and things. And if we want to get through difficult times, we've got to have strong families. We got to have strong character. And I'm telling you right now, a culture, a family, any place where dishonoring parents is acceptable, it's just not going to go well with them. Matthew 7:24. After Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. This is at the end of his Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus is given a lot of different instructions. He says, "Therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man, which built his house upon a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And everyone that heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them not shall be likened unto a foolish man, which built his house upon the sand. And the rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it." If we want to have a house built on a rock, meaning a house that's going to survive difficult times, we must follow the Word of God. We must follow Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And let me tell you this too, one of the things that we definitely want to do is honor our parents. If we do not do that kind of thing, when difficulties come, and they're going to come, We are going to be destroyed during those times. And when you have a culture of people who do not honor their parents, you have a culture in decline. And it will only be a matter of time, and that society will destroy itself. And I believe our country is in decline, for sure. Our country desperately needs strong families, and we need to understand that for the sake of our future, the future of the next generations, we must promote a culture that honors their parents. We must do it. And so the first thing to understand, that honoring parents, we've kind of limited what honoring parents are. We've kind of limited it to just saying good things, saying yes sir, yes ma'am, and obviously that's good. We should do those kind of things, but we've kind of limited to that, and there's actually more to it. In fact, look at Matthew chapter 15. I want to make sure we get this, because this is part of honoring our parents. And it says in verse 3, "But he answered and said unto them, Why do ye also transgress the commandment of God by your tradition? For God commanded, saying, Honor thy father and mother, and he that curseth father or mother, let him die the death. But ye say, Whosoever shall say to his father or mother, It is a gift, by whatsoever thou mightest be profited by me, and honor not his father or mother, he shall be free. Thus have ye made the commandment of God of none effect by your tradition." Now, without taking the time to go into this tradition Jesus is referring to, they had a practice and they had a tradition during that time of pledging things to, the temple or whatever, and they were basically, they found a loophole for taking care of, or they created a loophole, I guess I should say, where they could get around taking care of their parents after they got older. And understand, honoring parents, one of the things that specifically meant is taking care of them when they were older. That was part of it. And these guys, they had a tradition where they were able to kind of get around that obligation. And so that tradition that they had actually was causing them to violate the command of honoring their parents. Not because that tradition required them to curse out their parents or something like that. No, but that tradition that they had was giving them a way out of taking care of their parents. And therefore, they were not honoring their parents. So understand, honoring your parents, it's a big deal. It was a big job. And I want to go over several ways we can honor our parents. And let me just say, one of the best things you can do to help your children in this area is you've got to set the example on this. Say, well, my parents are bad. Well, good. Then that means it will be even easier for them to honor you if you're good parents. But understand, like we talked about this morning, you're going to mess up sometimes too. And if you're going to hold your parents' mistakes against them, if you're going to give yourself a loophole on honoring your father and mother because of mistakes your parents made, you better hope you don't make any mistakes. Otherwise, your kids will use those things. And understand, if your kids don't honor you, well, that's not going to make you feel good. It's not going to do them any good either. And so just keep all these things in mind. You've got to set the example. So first thing, and we're going to get back to more of what Matthew 15 is talking about here in a little bit, but the first thing you need to make sure you do when it comes to honoring your parents is always treat them with respect. There is just certain ways you should never speak to your parents. I don't care who they are. I don't care what they do. They are your parents. And there's just certain ways you don't speak to them. So, well, you don't understand. My dad is the ultimate jerk. Well, then you might need to just stay away, because if he truly is putting you in a situation where you are tempted to tell him off, curse him out, or something like that, then you just need to stay out of that situation, because you can't allow yourself that temptation to say something that that's very negative to your parents, because it's your parents. You don't want to even be perceived as speaking in a disrespectful way to them. And we're going to get into some of the challenges that are out there. People are always trying to find exceptions, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But listen, I'm telling you, just by default, you always treat them with respect. Leviticus 19:32 says, "Thou shalt rise up before the hoary head, and honor the face of the old man, and fear thy God. I am the Lord." And understand, we ought to have just, even any elderly people, there should just be an automatic respect that they get. There should just be a way that you speak to them that's respectful. You should not, there's a behavior you should have with them. And notice here too, it talks about rising up before the hoary head. I believe too, we should follow whatever customs our culture has that show honor and respect for elderly people and even for our parents. You say, well, we don't have much in our country. I know, our culture is just very uncouth, and we have all kinds of problems. But you know what? It wouldn't even hurt us to start some. So it has to be rising up. Well, that's one they had back then. I think it's just telling us here to just show respect. And that was often a way people would show respect. When elderly come, you stand to your feet. If an older lady comes walking in a room, it would be a good thing for younger people to stand up and, again, offer them their seat. Why? Out of respect. They're older. They need that seat more than you do. We should just treat elderly people with respect, and especially your parents. Always treat them with respect. Follow whatever customs there are. Proverbs 16:31 says, the hoary head is a crown of glory if it be found in the way of righteousness. And I get it. There's some people out there, they're old, they have the hoary head, they have the white head, they've not been righteous. But either way, I'm going to let God judge them, and I'm still going to just by fault be respectful to them. And it should just be default setting. Treat elderly people with respect, and you don't need to worry about checking their worthiness. I'm just going to assume that they are. I'm going to show that kind of respect. And so always, but especially with your parents, always treat them with respect. Don't ever speak of them in negative ways. Don't ever just talk to them in any kind of disrespectful tone. Also, here's another thing. Live a life that honors them. Did you know you can dishonor your parents by the way you live your life? Because again, and we talked about this a little bit this morning. I'm going to repeat some things from this morning. But understand, if you're living a life that's just a debaucherous life, what's one of the things people often think? Where are their parents? Whenever you see the riots that are going on in places with a lot of these young people, what is it that everybody always brings up? Where are their parents? It makes their parents look bad when they're living wicked lives. And even after you get in your 20s, even after you get in your 30s, and even after you get in your 40s, if you're acting a certain way, everybody's going to think, what's wrong with this guy? Who raised this kid? What's going on here? You can make your parents look bad by the life that you live. And you need to understand, I don't care how long you've been out of the house, you are always going to be a reflection on your parents, especially if you have their name. And that's why sometimes, too, it'd be nice to have a name like Smith or Jones or something like that, because then, nobody's going to associate with somebody. When you have a name like McMurtry, and people are going, that's pretty unique, especially in this area. And if you see a McMurtry in the newspaper, if you see, and there's been situations before. There was a lady in my dad's church years ago that had a very unique name. I won't say it from the pulpit. I don't want to embarrass anybody, but she had a unique name. But there was another woman in that town that had that same name. And sometimes that lady's name would be in the police reports for different things. And it was always embarrassing, this lady that was in my dad's church, because people would see that and sometimes they would ask her and be like, "Hey, what's going on?" And it's like, it's a different one, because it was a unique name. So when you bear the name of your parents, and you're out there behaving in a shameful way, you are dishonoring your parents. And I'm telling you right now, dishonoring your parents, it is a big deal. God gets very upset by that. And you can say yes sir, yes ma'am, no sir, no ma'am, whenever you're around your parents. But if you are living a wicked life, you are dishonoring your parents, even if you speak in a respectful way. Proverbs 19:26, he that wasteth his father, chaseth away his mother, is a son that causeth shame and bringeth a reproach. We looked at all these this morning. I'm not going to repeat all of them. He that gathereth in summer is a wise son, but he that sleepeth in the harvest is a son that causeth shame. If you are a lazy, good-for-nothing, who will not take care of his family, who will not provide for his wife and children, you're going to embarrass your parents. And you're going to shame your parents by doing that kind of thing. And that's not good for your parents, but it's for sure isn't good for you. When you're out there being worthless and destroying your own life, you've got these people that have said, it's my life, I can do what I want to with it. No, I disagree with that, because guess what? You wouldn't have this life if it wasn't for your parents. And yet, they brought you into this world, and they brought you in this world in America, where legally they could have executed you before you were even born. And they did. They chose to do the right thing, and they chose to bring you into this world. And you better believe you owe them, and you ought to live a life that is a decent life, and you don't have the right to bring them shame. You should live in a way that honors them. Proverbs 15:20 says, a wise son maketh a glad father, but a foolish man despiseth his mother. Do you think God wants us despising your mother? And so you go out there acting like an idiot. You go out there acting like the fool. You hate your mom. You know why? Because your mom, you're going to hurt your mom. You go out there and you start dealing drugs and you get caught. You know who's going to get hurt just as bad as you, maybe not more? Your mom and your dad. You better believe they're going to care. I get it. There's psycho parents out there that don't care what happens to their kids after they get out of the house. But most parents aren't complete psychopaths. Most parents love their children. And if you go out there and you destroy your life and you get involved in all kinds of wickedness, you are going to devastate and bring great pain to your parents. You have no right to do that kind of thing. So understand, you're not here to just live this life for yourself. God expects you to honor your parents. And do you see now why it's well with you when you honor your parents? Because again, you going out being a drug dealer, you going out and messing with drugs and alcohol and becoming a drunk and things like that, you think it's your life, you can do whatever you want, but you doing that is destroying you and it's honoring your parents. But yet, if you have people who understand, I have a responsibility to honor my parents, I can't be a drug addict. Nobody's impressed with that guy walking out the street talking to himself. Nobody's impressed with the lady. There's a lady over in Morrison who stands on the street corner dancing around all the time and acting really weird. And it's weird when you see that kind of thing. And no parents are proud of that kind of thing. But you know what? That's what you're going to do if you do drugs. And you know what? You're going to bring shame to your parents if you do that kind of thing. You're not going to honor your parents. So it's for your benefit to live a life that brings your parents joy, that honors your parents. Proverbs 23:24, the father of the righteous shall greatly rejoice, and he that begetteth a wise child shall have joy of him. Thy father and thy mother shall be glad, and she that bare thee shall rejoice. And so let me just say this. The happier your parents are, the better off you are going to be. And there is in all of us, this kind of rebellious nature that's there. When I was a youth director, that was one of the things I would try to get into the heads of children, that pleasing your parents is to your benefit. Because your parents, while they might seem controlling and while they might drive you crazy sometimes with all their rules, they have these rules because they are desperate for you to turn out good and to be happy. Because parents who love their children, parents who aren't complete psychopaths, are not going to be able to have joy if their children do not have joy. And so when parents see their children going down a path that's going to destroy their life, that terrifies them. And so all those rules and restrictions that they're putting on you, it's not because they just have this crazy need to control you. It's just they have this extreme desire to be happy, and your happiness brings them happiness. So understand, your parents, they're going to know more than you. They're going to have more wisdom. They can see farther down the road than you can see. And so while their rules are annoying and they drive you crazy and they're limiting what you desire to do, just understand they're limiting the lust of your ability to indulge in the lust of the flesh that are deceptive. And boy, if kids would just have the wisdom to just trust God and to just do what their parents tell them, as annoying as it is to you, boy, you would just be decades ahead of so many other people. You would avoid so much heartache in your life if you would just do that one thing. You say, well, my parents, they're not the highest IQ people, they're not the smartest people in the world, but they do have just a natural, instinctive love for you. And they know, your parents know you better than anybody else. They know you better than your pastor knows you, and they know what's best for you better than anybody else. You know why? Because you are a combination of your mom and dad. You are a mixture of your mom and dad, and so they're going to have a little more insight into, your future than anybody else, because you've inherited a lot of their traits. Things that, there are some things that I don't struggle with that much, and that's just me. I have my areas of struggles. I have my areas of strength, and my children often have some of those same things. Typically my kids' weaknesses come from their mother, their strength comes from me, and so they're at the same time, I'm having fun with everybody here, and just trying to get myself in trouble. But at the same time, as parents, I understand. No, my kids, they're not even allowed to touch this. You know why? Because I see too much of me in them, and I know I can't mess with this stuff. And that's why, too, every home's rules are going to be a little bit different. Say, why are my parents so crazy strict in this one area? Probably because mom and dad struggled in that area. And you know what? You come from your mom and dad. You will probably struggle in that area too. You should probably listen to them. Yeah, but at so-and-so's house, they're not that strict. Well, maybe their parents don't struggle with that as much. And maybe their kids are like them because they come from them. That's why kids, hey, your parents, they choose the rules for your house. And you know what? Other parents choose the rules for their house. You were born in your parents' house. You got to follow those rules. And just understand, they know what's going on. And at the end of the day, even if they're not the greatest people in the world, the smartest people in the world, if your parents aren't complete psychopaths, they desire your happiness. That's what they want for you. And they know better. It's in them to know what's best for you better than anybody else. So just trust them. Just trust God in these things. Because understand, your life is a reflection on your parents. And it doesn't necessarily mean they always deserve it, but it is a reflection on them. Like I mentioned this morning, sometimes you can have a parent who messed up in a lot of ways, but somehow God got a hold of that child's heart. They have gone on, they have served the Lord, they have done good, and they have made their parents look good, even if they didn't deserve it. And you know what? They honored their parents by doing that, even though their parents might not have really deserved it. And so there are bad parents out there who have kids who have turned out great as a result. And as a result of that, the parents were honored. And you know what? That's okay. If you honor your parents more than they deserve, I would rather honor my parents more than they deserve than dishonor them. Because again, and I'm not even going to say dishonor them more than they deserve, because they don't deserve it. We're not supposed to do that. You don't have a right to do that. God's not going to be mad at you if your life makes your parents look better than they are. God's not going to be mad at you for that. We need to make our families look good for our own personal benefit as well. You making your families look good means you're doing good. So for sure, you ought to be trying to please your parents. When you make your parents look good, it's because you are succeeding at life. So always make sure too, this is part of your honoring your parents, always make sure that your parents are taken care of. And listen, every father should do everything they can to make sure his kids don't have to take care of them for as long, or their mother for as long as possible. But you know what, kids, you need to be ready. Okay, listen, I don't want to have to move into my kid's house. I don't want my kids to have to take care of me. You know, I don't want to do that. But at the same time, you know what? I hope if I ever do need them, that's why you have a bunch of them too. That way you can space it out as much as possible, you know, and they can get the longer breaks. If you only have one kid, that kid's in big trouble, you know. But so keep those things in mind. That's the benefit to many kids. But let me show you something in the scriptures too. We forget about this. Is part of honoring your parents. I believe this is mainly what God was talking about when he said to honor your parents. Not just saying respectful things. But in 1 Timothy 5:8, we're all familiar with 1 Timothy 5:8. But if any provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. And I don't think a person is wrong to make an application from this verse. And yes, if a guy's not taking care of his wife and children, what a garbage individual that is. No doubt about that. However, is this talking about wife and children here? No. Look what it says in verse 3. It says, honor widows. Now he's talking to the church here. And he says, honor widows that are widows indeed. But if any widow have children or nephews, which is grandchildren, let them learn first to show piety at home and requite their parents. For that is good and acceptable for God. So God did not want the widows in the church to just be left in the streets, to not be taken care of. And God's given some instructions for taking care of widows. But notice, that's if they don't have children or grandchildren. they are the first ones that should be taking care of them, their children and their grandchildren. That is acceptable to God. And then he goes on in verse 8, after he's given those specific, qualifications or whatever. He says, but if any provide not for his own, especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. Let not a widow be taken into the number under 80 years old, having been the wife of one man. That entire passage is about taking care of widows. And so again, when it refers to them not taking care of his own, that's referring to like his mother or grandmother. That's not even talking about his wife and children. Now again, if we're required to take care of our mother and grandmother, you for sure are required to take care of your wife and children. There's no doubt about that. Yes, when a preacher gets up and applies that to wives and children, he's not wrong. But it's also referring to your parents. That's what it's directly talking about. So you better believe we should be taking care of our parents. You don't want to just go dump them off down by the river. And listen, if even, again, just dumping them off in a nursing home. But even that, okay, at least in a nursing home, they're fed, they're sheltered, they're taken care of. And I've done nursing home ministries for years and years, and sometimes you have no choice. And let me just say this too, if you have family in a nursing home, sometimes that is what's best for them, but you know what, you still need to honor them too by visiting them, because they get very lonely in those places. And if you do have to put them in one, visit them regularly. They love visitors, they love having people. And let me just say this too, there's some horror stories about people not being well taken care of in nursing homes, and nursing homes typically take care of the people there more who have visitors regularly, because they know people who care are going to be checking up on them. So just you visiting them regularly will get them better care in a lot of these places. But and let me just say to this, not all nursing homes are equal. But again, we need to understand ultimately it's our responsibility. And I understand the government's taking care of a lot of it, but that's one of the reasons it's got a lot of problems too. And we don't really want to depend on them for that. But we have in America today, we've kind of reduced honoring our parents to simply just not cursing them and saying polite things about them. But in the Bible, it was about taking care of them and making sure they were treated with dignity. You should not be okay with your mom and dad living out on the streets. You should not be okay with them being out there cold and hungry or anything like that. And I'm glad we've got a lot of systems in our country today that takes care of the elderly. I'm glad we have those things. I think that's a good reflection on our society, but we might not always have those things. And either way, we don't want to just depend on them. Ultimately, it's on us to make sure our parents are taken care of. And so, but I do think that's an area where, we've got some things going for us in our culture. But I'm not going to depend on them. But because we live in 2025 America, which is a culture in decline, we do have many people who feel like there's exceptions to honoring your parents, because there are bad parents out there. I mean, there's no doubt there are bad parents out there, but I do want to deal with what some would think are exceptions, because this is important. Because, should you honor your father and mother if they're bad fathers and mothers? And the answer is yes. I don't see any exceptions in the Bible when it talks about, he said, what if your parents are a reprobate? That's a classic question I always get. What about, just shut up, okay? So, well, I think my mom's a reprobate. Shut up. It's your mom and dad. You treat them with a certain level of respect. But how do we handle things if our parents are truly evil? And listen, there are going to be times where you might have to say, I'm sorry, I have to cut you out of my life. There are parents out there who don't know their place, who are truly evil, who will undermine you as a parent. And let me tell you, I'm a grandpa now, and I would never do this, and I hope I would never do this, but some grandparents will do that, where they will tell their children, their grandchildren, they'll go against their parents' rules, they'll pit the grandkids against their parents. That is a terrible thing to do. I have known people like that have done that with their grandkids. And you know what? I remember there were some people like that in my dad's church. My dad said, you have to keep your kids away from their grandma. If she's going to do that kind of thing, if she is going to break their rules on purpose, parents, don't let your parents do that to your kids. And if you're a grandparent, don't ever do that. to your children. You have no right to do that. When it comes to my grandchildren, you know what? My children outrank me. When it comes to Tommy the Fourth, he should listen to Tommy the Third before Tommy the Second, and even Tommy the First. I mean, really, you'd think the first would have ultimate say, right? And the second right after that. But no. In the way things are supposed to be biblically, Tommy the Third, who I bossed around his whole life, has more authority than I do with Tommy the Fourth. That's the way it is. And never forget that. If you're a grandparent, never forget that. You have no right to undermine your children's authority over their children. And kids, you always listen to mom and dad over grandma and grandpa. That they are the highest rank. And so there are situations like that. We definitely don't want to be that way, where we're causing problems there. But it is very possible your parents messed you up, set you up for failure. But you need to realize you still need to honor your parents, because you have to show your kids how to do it. And so there's horrible abusive parents, there's scumbags, there's reprobates. I recently saw a program too. Have you ever heard of trans widows? It's like, what is a trans widow? A trans widow is a woman whose husband became a woman, and it ruined their marriage, which I could see how that would ruin a marriage. And I saw an interview with a lady whose husband became a woman. And, and surprise, surprise, it was a really weird, messed up marriage that they had. And it didn't survive. It ended. And so she refers to herself as a trans widow. And it just completely wrecked them. If that kind of stuff's going on, you're going to have to do that. But that doesn't mean your kids can hear you cursing them, just making fun of them, saying terrible things. No. And so the first thing you need to make sure, no matter how, this is if you have horrible parents. Okay? If you have horrible parents, first off, never curse your parents or use reproachful language against them. If you have to tell your children about how bad your parents are, it ought to be said with sorrow. Your kids ought to see that you're sad about that. Your kids ought to see parents who want to have a relationship with their parents, but maybe they can't. But at the same time, never use that reproachful language. Matthew 15:4, for God commanded, saying, honor thy father and mother, and he that curseth father and mother, let him die the death. Proverbs 20:20, whoso curseth his father or his mother, his lamp shall be put out in obscure darkness. Proverbs 30:11, there is a generation that curseth their father and doth not bless their mother. I'm not seeing exceptions in here. So again, if I had parents that I had to cut out of my life, I would cut them out of my life if I had to. But you know what I'm not going to do? I would be afraid to just go cursing them, saying bad things about them. I would be afraid to do that kind of thing, because the Bible is pretty clear about that. I'm not going to ever use reproachful language against my parents. Doesn't mean you can't speak the truth about your parents. If you had a father and you found out he was committing some horrible crimes or was a pedophile or something like that, you might have to turn him into the police. But you know what? If you turn him into the police, it ought to be with sorrow. It ought to be with tears. You should be like, oh, good, I finally get to turn that rat in. No, that's your dad. That's your dad. You might have to do that. You should always speak with reverence when talking about him. And reverence means fear, mingled with respect and esteem or veneration. So again, and I'm thankful I'm not in this situation, but if I had a situation where I had evil parents and that were doing horrible, evil things, I would still, hopefully, I would still speak in a way that showed a reverence and fear when I talk about my father and my mother. Because I understand that even though I'm ashamed of what they're doing and it's terrible what they're doing, they are my father and mother, and I refuse to speak in a reproachful way. I knew of a situation several years ago where there were some pastors whose father was also in the ministry, but their father had made some very foolish doctrinal choices and was promoting some pretty messed up stuff, doctrinally speaking. And of course, it reflected bad on the sons, because they're seeing their father kind of go down this bad and weird path, and everybody was wondering what they were saying. And I remember these guys they ended up taking a stand, and they basically had to stand against their father. But the way they handled it, they basically put it out there publicly. This is where I stand on this issue. This is what I believe. But they said nothing about their dad. They never mentioned him. They didn't bring him up. But because of what their dad was promoting, everybody wondered where they were, and they did. They just told people where they were. And they basically made it clear, I'm not going down that path. I don't believe what he believes. But you know what they still did not do? They did not dishonor their father. They did not disrespect him in any way. And you know what? I respected that. And it upset a lot of people. They wanted to hear them trash their father. And their father was wrong. But they refused to do that. They're like, no, we're not going to bring that up. This is our father. And you know what? I agreed. I thought they handled that properly. Even though I wasn't a big fan of their father, I felt they handled that properly, because you know what? If it was my father, if my father did that, I wouldn't go out there saying nasty things about him. I wouldn't go out there talking bad. I wouldn't want anybody to think I believe that. I wouldn't want anybody to think I'm going that direction. But you know, I'm glad they didn't take the bait and go out there and just start talking trash about their dad. And so I don't respect as people many of our politicians, but you know what? I do reverence the office. And so if I ever were to meet up with the president or even our governor, I have no respect for our governor as a person. I have no respect for his policies. But if I were allowed an audience with the governor, I would speak in a way that showed respect and reverence, because I respect the office. And so I wouldn't just go in there calling him Fred Flintstone or talking about his size or his stupidity or anything like that. And I might think that, but I wouldn't do that. And so Ephesians 5:33 says, nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife, even as himself, and the wife see that she reverence her husband. It's showing a respect. It's showing respecting the authority that they have, and we need to always be that way. And so even if our parents were out of the home, they're not under our authority, but they're still our parents. So there's going to be a reverential way we are going to speak about them, even if we're completely ashamed of what they're doing. And without a doubt, too, there's many deadbeat husbands out there that are miserable failures as husbands. But you know what? Wives should still show a reverence out of a fear of God. And again, and that's why you should ultimately, no matter who your parents are, show a certain level of respect and reverence, not because you fear them. They might be drug addicts, they might be meth heads or whatever, but you know what? You don't have any reason to fear them, but because you fear God, you're not going to be going around talking about your meth mouth mom. Because I fear God, I'm not going to speak that way, even if it's true. And so as an adult, there may come that point where you have no choice but to separate. But that doesn't mean you can disrespect them, and your children should see that separation causes you sorrow. You shouldn't enjoy it. And you should be ready, willing, and anxious, and able to give your forgiveness to your parents at the drop of a hat. You ought to be, they ought to want to see that. But understand, you are not dishonoring your parents if you set boundaries. You're not dishonoring your parents if you give correction if it's needed, or again, even turning them in for crimes. That's not dishonoring your parents to turn them in for crimes. Sometimes you might do that to protect others. You might need to do it to protect themselves. And so, a lot of people have this attitude, you can never do anything that's technically against your parents. Well, it's not really against your parents. If my dad is holding up gas stations, eventually it's going to get him killed. And so in reality, if I turn him into the police, I'm protecting him, because he's going to get caught eventually. And so I would do that if that was going on. And so there's some people, some people have actually brought their parents shame for doing the right thing. Okay? Now, understand, if you do that, that's not you necessarily dishonoring your parents, because Matthew 10:34, properly applied, says, for I think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. For I am come to set a man at variance against his father, and the daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's foes shall be they of his own household. He that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. He that taketh not his cross and followeth after me is not worthy of me. He that findeth his life shall lose it. He that loseth his life for my sake shall find it. Often people will apply that in a Christian home when kids go wayward. Oh, that's Jesus causing division. No. You know how you can cause your parents shame? If your parents were Catholics and you become a Baptist, you might bring them shame. If your parents were Mormon and you become a Baptist, you're probably going to bring your parents shame. Okay? Now, that's not you causing the division. That's Jesus causing the division in that situation. Especially, too, if you were Jewish and you're like, I'm converting to Christianity, you are going to bring your parents shame in that situation. But that's not you doing that. That's Jesus Christ bringing that division. And understand, He is still doing that in many families and in many parts of the world. As people convert to Christianity, that causes division in that family. And I think that, in a situation like that, that's not you causing the division. That's Jesus doing it. And yes, that would actually bring your family shame in that situation. Some people apply this in a Christian family when their child goes to the devil. They'll say, well, that just proves I'm righteous because Jesus said he came not to send peace but a sword. It's like, really? So Jesus tried to separate your children from a Christian family to the devil? I don't think that's how that's applied. No, this is about people following Christ. And if following Christ has brought shame to your family, you need to do everything that you can to show them that you can bring them great joy and pride and joy in every other area of life, and pride in the modern American sense in a good way. You should love them more than the rest of your family does. Again, being a Christian shouldn't make you a worse son and daughter and make your family worse. It should make your family better. You should be more successful and happy than everyone else. You should raise kids they can be proud of. And so again, even in a situation, if your parents were some false religion, did you know there's some ways that, there are some things that universally honor parents? Because they talk about making your parents look good by you succeeding. Well, you know one thing that makes parents look good is large families. And when I say that too, large families where the children are taken care of. There are some people that are real good at bringing a bunch of kids into the world that are all on welfare, that are out of control, they're not taken care of. And often too, that upsets grandparents. There are grandparents out there who, when they find out their son or daughters have another baby, they're like, oh. And typically the reason they do that is because they know this is more work for me. Because good grandparents, they're not going to let their grandkids go hungry. But at the same time, they know if I don't help, they will go hungry. And so understand, part of this is you as parents taking care of your kids. And again, I've only got one grandchild so far, but I hope to have a whole bunch. But you know what? I don't want to raise them. And I can't afford to pay for all their stuff. So if my kids grow up and they're all having large families, that's going to honor me. That's going to make me look good when we're getting our family pictures taken. And there's 200 of us all together, and I'm the old guy there. And if they're a large family where they're taken care of. Now, if there's 200 of us, and they all look like we got drug out of a prison or something like they're just like real rough looking. Everybody's all tatted up, and I got like 3-year-olds flashing gang signs and stuff like that. That's not going to make me look good. Obviously, there is a look that that helps with that. But just happy families. If you do. Your parents are going to just naturally have a love for you, even if they don't like what you're doing, and they're going to have a love for their grandkids. And sometimes Catholics and other religions, they're deceived into thinking if they get involved in these other religions, they're going to go down this terrible path. But if they see a family that loves each other, if they see a family that's functional, if they see children that are happy, I think you might eventually win them over on those things. And they might at least get to a point where they're not mad at you anymore. Because understand, if you were, before you got saved, maybe you were from a Catholic family, and you were a drunk and your marriage was terrible, that wasn't bringing your parents any joy. But if you becoming a Baptist, got your marriage on track and got you living a productive life, they're going to appreciate that. And they're going to think maybe there's something to this Baptist thing. So just being happy, being healthy, being educated. Nobody wants dumb descendants, dumb grandkids and things like that. Being successful in business, being stable families where you stick with one spouse till death. You know what? Nobody is proud of their child's divorce. I understand divorces happen, but nobody's ever been proud of their divorce. I remember one of my best friends growing up, he was telling me how they were at their grandparents' one time, and they had this shelf of VHS tapes, and it had the weddings of all their kids. They were always filming their weddings. And there was one spot where there was two, because one of them had been married twice. And one of the grandkids said something about it one time. They're like, yeah, that's for whatever the name of the kid is. I'm starting a collection. And it's kind of like just making fun of them. And it aggravated them. They were kind of like the black sheep of the family because they'd been married twice. Nobody's proud of just the multiple wives their son has had. And so just understand, when you go and you find a husband, you find a wife, and you stick with them forever, and you have a bunch of kids with that same person, your parents like that. I don't care who they are, they like that. Nobody has ever been, when bragging about their family, it's like, you know what, I'm really proud of my son. He's having his 4th marriage. I know some guys can't get one wife. He's on his 4th. Nobody's ever bragged about that. So these are things that will help you honor your parents universally, even if they're lost. It will make them look good. And here's another thing too. Being a heterosexual family, okay? Listen, nobody's proud of their son's husband and their adopted kids. Nobody's proud of that. They pretend they are. Nobody's proud of that kind of thing. And so just understand, you being a good Christian family where you're one unit, same wife, same husband, bunch of kids, healthy, happy, educated, hardworking, you will please your parents. I don't care what religion they are. You will bring honor to them by doing that. And so lastly, real quick, just always look out for your parents and be ready to forgive and be a witness. People want to leave a legacy and they want their name to go on. Psalms 127:3, lo, children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are the children of the youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate. And if you've raised a godly Christian family, you have done a great thing for your parents, whether they acknowledge it or not. Be the kind of family they want to claim, and maybe they will eventually come around. Because everybody in America today, everybody is. They're impressed with just that nice-looking, healthy, functional family. And even if they don't like your religion, if you do all these other things, you will bring them honor. You will make them look good. When you send them that Christmas card with your nice-looking, clean-cut family of boys who look like boys and girls who look like girls, you better believe they're going to put that in a prominent place somewhere in their house, wanting their friends to see that when they come over. Yeah, that's my son's family right there. Those are my grandkids right there. You better believe they're going to claim that if you do that. And so hopefully you understand now why honoring your parents, it's as much for you as it is for them, if not more so. And so Paul said to honor your parents, so it would be well with thee, and so you would live long on the earth. And we have everything to gain from obeying this commandment. We have everything to lose if we disobey it. And even if it's harder for you because you've got a rough situation, it's still in your best interest and for your benefit to honor and to give honor to your parents. God will see it. God will be pleased. Your children will see it. And you know what? If your parents have made a lot of mistakes, you have a greater opportunity to make sure your children honor you. Can you imagine just hearing your child curse you and for them to just not want to have anything to do with you or what? I can't imagine anything like that. And so if I'm honoring my parents, they're going to be more likely to do that same thing with me. If I'm overlooking mistakes my parents make, they'll be more likely to overlook my mistakes. It's going to come back on you however you operate in this area. So with that, let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for your word. I pray this message was a help to everybody. I pray you'll help us as a church, as families, to follow this command of honoring our parents. I pray you'll help us as a nation to make this a part of our culture, that we would be a people who are just horrified at hearing anybody curse their parents. I pray that you'll